We begin this story with our protagonist Kufa. He is a young assassin with incredible skills who one day is hired to impersonate an instructor and kill a young aristocratic girl named Melida. When Kufa arrived at the residence, he saw her on the edge of her balcony, but as soon as she noticed the presence of her new instructor, she felt so embarrassed that she lost her balance and fell. In a romantic way, Kufa reacted quickly and grabbed her in his arms, creating a love at first sight situation. He wasn't a simple instructor since he would be at her side all the time and would even go with her to her academy. This helped him to realize that Melida was constantly being bullied for not possessing prana, the power that grants various rare talents and raises physical ability beyond usual. In fact, if you belong to a noble family, you should have a higher prana than the rest. Unfortunately, this doesn't apply to Melida, who is rejected by her own family that considers her a disgrace. To make it even worse, she has a cousin named Elise who she always ends up being compared to. This is because, despite her young age, Elise has reached the paladin class, which only a small number of people can possess. The reason why our protagonist was hired to murder this poor girl was because her grandfather, Mr. Mondru, doubted that she was a legitimate daughter of the angels, for she had not awakened her prana. This is how Kufa's manager assigned him the mission of becoming her private tutor to guide her and raise her as a maiden worthy of the aristocrats. But in the case that he saw that she lacked any special ability or attitude of her family, he had the order to kill her. After observing her for a few days, Kufa decides to put an end to her cruel life, but when he enters her room, she is not around. Melida was running away from some lycanthropes, a kind of spirits called to attack Melida in order to make her release her prana. It never gives the expected results because she always ends up brutally beaten. Kufa was intrigued to see that she didn't ask for help from someone to save her, since doing so would mean accepting that she has no prana and is not a child of the family angels. After witnessing the girl's determination to become stronger, he saved her and then promised her that he would always be by her side and give her all his support. He also proposed to her to trust him with her life in exchange for power, and in the same way he will dedicate the rest of his life to her. Once Melida accepted, Kufa took a substance that he carried with him. He kissed her and she fell into a deep sleep, almost as if she was slowly dying. After she woke up, our protagonist told her that, unfortunately, she didn't receive the paladin class that she wanted so much, but instead she received the same class as him, that is to say, samurai. Still, she wasn't at all disappointed. In fact, she was glad to have the same class as her instructor. There was one small condition, which was that she couldn't show her new powers until next week's tournament, because people would create rumors about how someone like Melida got so much power in such a short time. Afterwards, they met the instructor Rosdi, a cheerful young woman who, despite her young age, managed to join Chris Legion, a guild that only accepts people with strength comparable to that of a paladin. A few days went by and finally the long-awaited tournament arrived, where Melida would be able to demonstrate the hours of training with her new power. Unexpectedly, Melida's father and grandfather were also there and would observe her performance to make the final decision. In case of failure, they would probably get rid of both of them. Once the tournament starts, Melida attacks the girl who always harassed her since she was the leader of the group, and if she defeated her, they would win. Clearly, that girl was pretty confident because she thought she was facing the same weak Melida as always. But this time, she released her new power to respond with a counterattack and blow her away, which surprised everyone in the audience, for they never imagined that she could awaken her prana. However, her happiness did not last long, because her prana was quickly consumed and things went back to the beginning. So the other girl became confident again to torture her, but as a last resource, Melida used a technique that she observed from Kufa when she was saved by him. It was called Ghost Sword, with which she ended up achieving the victory in the tournament. After the tournament, all seemed to end well. The festival parade was approaching, in which the students of the academy wore a white dress given to them by the students of the past generation. They all agreed to wear them except for Elise, who was forced by her family to wear her own dress, worthy of her. It would make everyone else think that she just wanted to show off her fancy dress on the day of the festival, which causes her to walk away crying of helplessness for not being able to do what she wanted to. At that very moment, Melida appeared to comfort her and make her feel better, as they had always been very close. But suddenly Jin appeared, an enemy born of experiments between humans and lycanthropes. He kidnapped them both, put one of his bandages on them to lock up their prana, and made them unable to use their power. Melida would do anything she could to escape without depending on their prana. The enemy wanted to capture them alive, but his plans changed after noticing the overwhelming power when the two of them joined forces, so he decided to destroy both. At that moment, their instructors came to save them. It is worth mentioning that initially Jin was also ordered to capture or eliminate Melida, but as he refused to do so they decided to go to a different guild for that job. Kufa confronts Jin and a lycanthrope named Hunter Chimera, a monster that humans are unable to equal. Although they were 2 against 1, it seemed that Kufa had everything under control, but when he let his guard down he was trapped by Jin's bandages that locked all his prana. He was crushed by the monster and ended up losing his arm. So strong was his intention to protect Melida that he continued fighting to the death and ended up being swallowed by the monster. But unexpectedly that monster ended up totally deformed. It is true that for a human it would be impossible to kill him, but actually Kufa was a vampire. He was hiding his true form and power, but he was also half lycanthrope and half human, and was even considered the strongest of all. After Gim's guild failed, the same people who hired him decided to give the mission to Black Media, a little girl who communicated through magic messages. The academy tightened its security and started the Luna Lumiere selection tournament, where neighboring academies would choose their 2 best students based on academic and magical performance. Surprisingly, Elise and Melida were selected. No one expected them to be chosen, so the others thought it might have been a sabotage. Both of them had to form their own teams. For Melida, it was tough, but 2 girls volunteered to be her teammates. One of them used to bully her for not having enough prana, but after getting beaten up, she decided to be her friend. The other girl was popular, and many thought she should have been chosen instead of Melida. Once all the teams were formed, they were given a few days to train and coordinate. During Melida's team break, they noticed that Elise's maid was acting suspiciously near the forest. Kufa found enough evidence that she had sabotaged the selection to make Elise and Melida face each other and show the difference between them. Melida clearly got angry and declared that they had a strong bond that would never be broken. She proposed that if she defeated Elise, her maid would accept her, just like everyone else. Afterwards, everyone went to sleep, each with their thoughts about what was about to happen, except for Kufa, who received a message in the form of an origami. He knew who it was from, so he decided to go to the forest. There, he met Black Media, who told him that the higher-ups were questioning his loyalty for not following orders and suspected that he had something to do with Melida's awakened prana. Despite his denial, she knew what Kufa was planning, which led to a minor confrontation. On the other hand, Elise suggested to Melida that she let her win on purpose, so they could be accepted and always be together. Melida didn't like that, as she felt that even Elise saw her as weak and believed she wouldn't stand a chance against her. Kufa couldn't defeat Black Media, so Rosti came to help him. However, they weren't a match for her, since she was a clown class bearer and had the ability to mimic any of the 7 existing classes. But then, the Academy's security measures were deployed, so she decided to escape. The 2 cousins began to separate from each other, but it wasn't the time to think about that since the selection tournament was still on. The big day arrived and both Kufa and Rosti would be alert to any suspicious situation, as Black Media could steal the identity of anyone present. The fight started and the members of both teams left Melida and Elise to sort out their problems on their own. Although Melida received several blows at the beginning, she wouldn't give up so easily and even encouraged Elise to use all her power. Elise seemed to be underestimating Melida too much, as she considered her incapable of facing an attack from her. The fight took an unexpected twist as Melida attacked her and ripped off her sword. The fight ended with an emotional embrace between them. But the moment didn't last long, as the girl who seemed to be part of Melida's team appeared in front of them, and it was actually Black Media in disguise in order to kill Melida. As expected, Kufa arrived again to save her and defeat Black Media once and for all. The tournament was postponed due to the incident. The next day their academy had an excursion to a very interesting city, and on their way they met Rosti and Elise. Although what surprised everyone was when Rosti asked Kufa to pretend to be her fiancé, since her father wanted her to marry a guy she wasn't interested in at all. After she begged Kufa for his help, he ended up agreeing. Unexpectedly, Rossetti's father, Marquis Blossom Prickett, known as a great engineer in genetics, arrived. He couldn't accept that Kufa was Rossetti's fiancé, since he saw reflected in him the face of someone who was supposed to have passed away a few years ago, a 12-year-old boy and the possible culprit of a series of murders. There were cases in which some girls had their magic stolen and left passed out inside the academy. The Marquis showed a new revolutionary invention, a volatile agent that tracks any mana signal. It turned out that the culprit was a teenager who possessed blue mana, and the only one who matched those clues was Kufa. Yet they continued their school trip to Shangarda, a subway land that is full of rare vegetation and flowers. There, chaos is also happening since a very rare disease was turning the inhabitants into uncontrollable monsters. It seems that cases of magic theft along with murders reached that city, and the only culprit who the Marquis believed was Kufa, so everyone began to look for him. But there are still some people who believe he was innocent. One of them was Melida, who with the help of her friend searched for information about mysterious matters which could have something to do with those strange attacks. This is how they managed to find an abandoned cabin where they found a secret passage which would lead them to a kind of dungeon and laboratory for human experiments. After they both returned to the surface, they were surprised to find that 2 students were again attacked. Roasty, who apparently was dead, and Elise, who had just fainted. After that situation, they had no doubt about the culprit since they didn't see Kufa anywhere. That's why the local people tried to take Melida as bait. As Melida ran away, she remembered that both the Marquis and her instructor took her away from a rock in the middle of the forest, which she destroyed to discover another cave which inside hid a small bookstore that kept research on the night djinn. Apparently, all this research belonged to the Marquis, who failed to control the gene 7 years ago. It seemed that someone entered Melida's mind and threatened her for entering his old home. Rosie, who had supposedly died, seems to be fine. She was simply being controlled by someone and also had the same appearance of being a vampire like Kufa. But at that moment he arrived to stop her by transforming himself into a vampire in front of Melida's eyes. He was able to stop her, but what he was unable to control was his craving for blood and embarrassment for his disciple to see him in that aspect. Melida was still in love with him, so she allowed him to take some of her blood and kiss her. Then they go to look for Roasty since he ran away and was about to get married, but Melida mentioned to her the love she had for Kufa and even told her that she had kissed him, not to make her jealous but to free her from the control she was in. Melida threw a weak fire attack at the Marquis, who had a small spider in his hair that was actually the real enemy that controlled Rossetti and sometimes entered Melida's mind. He was Nakwa, another lycanthrope that destroyed the Marquis village 7 years ago. Roasty and Kufa in their vampire form defeat him. But when she transformed into a vampire, Roasty remembered that he was her older brother. But Kufa immediately blocked her memories again so that she could live a peaceful life among the people, as it was the deal he made with his guild. Third year, students were about to graduate, so an event called the Library Certification Exam was approaching, which was a test in a large labyrinth and library at the same time. Unexpectedly, the principal invited both Elise and Melida to participate in the next test, while secretly a group of nobles were talking about Melida's performance in the selection tournament. A student from the nearby school named Mule examined the handbook of all the participants of the selection tournament and discovered that Melida's mana was quite different compared to her cousins, so they came to the conclusion that Melida was not the Count's legitimate daughter. So they decided to reveal the truth and put on a big show where a strange man in a mask claimed to be Merida's real father to raise doubts about whether her words were true or not. In the labyrinth test, the principal told them that they had to find a certain book that would give them their approval and then return to the surface before the hourglass that they would take with them was over. When they left for the test, a woman told them that Melida's father wanted to talk to Kufa to tell him that she was going to be removed from the school because he had heard a rumor about the suspicious man who claimed to be her real father, and he wanted to avoid problems that would lower his social class. But the trouble was just about to begin as he received a suspicious letter from the Griffin Guild which said the appetite of the demons increases and books written with young blood will fill the library. It was obviously a clear warning of what would happen to the participants of the test. That's exactly what happened because the group was split up. Ellis and Melida were left alone and were thrown to a much deeper floor. There they met Mule and Salasha. Both claimed to be part of the test and teamed up with them to find the approval book as quickly as possible. Once they all had their books, she took hers from Melida and then ran away. Unexpectedly, Melida and Elise were transported to a court to decide their punishment, and for that, they would use a magic book that was stolen from the labyrinth in the trial. They read Merida's book of approval, which revealed her samurai class. She defended herself by saying that her instructor had shown it to her and that there were even some nobles who did not achieve the same class as their descendants. What they didn't miss was how she went from being an incompetent talent to having overwhelming power. Clearly, she could not answer truthfully and everyone began to insult her and her family, but that only caused her to become angry and tell them about her big dream, which was to be the strongest to raise the Angel family name high. They asked her to prove it with actions and not words, so they made her face Salasha. After an intense combat, Melida ends up defeating her, and that is when they realize that she really could be the Count's legitimate daughter. So, the Duke, who was actually the same masked man who pretended to be Melida's imposter father, decides to silence everyone present, including the 4 princesses, before he could lay a hand on Melida. Again, Kufa arrived to rescue her and put an end to the enemy and resolve everything in a good way for Melida. When her father found out that she was samurai class, he told her that he has distant memories of her great-grandmother's generation in which there was someone with the same class and that she looked just like Melinoa, her dead mother, implying that he would finally accept her just the way she is. Base Salasha. After an intense combat, Melida ends up defeating her, and that is when they realize that she really could be the Count's legitimate daughter. So, the Duke, who was actually the same masked man who pretended to be Melida's imposter father, decides to silence everyone present, including the 4 princesses, before he could lay a hand on Melida. Again, Kufa arrived to rescue her and put an end to the enemy and resolve everything in a good way for Melida. When her father found out that she was samurai class, he told her that he has distant memories of her great-grandmother's generation in which there was someone with the same class and that she looked just like Melinoa, her dead mother, implying that he would finally accept her just the way she is.